start the meeting. But before we go in, before we start, just to inform you that I've got an urgent item of business that we'll be dealing with under any other business at the end of the meeting. So with that, I'd welcome members to the Policy Resources Committee Tuesday the 3rd of December, and I would remind members that this meeting is being recorded. Before I go into the meeting, members will have seen the appalling tragedy that occurred in Glasgow at the weekend, which sadly has so far resulted in the death of 9 people and injury to many others. I wanted to inform members that yesterday I wrote to Gordon Mathieson, the leader of Glasgow City Council, to express our council's deepest sympathies to all those who lost loved ones in the tragedy. Moving on, Sederunt apologies.
Thank you, Chair. With no apologies, Councillor Scobie is not yet here. We just assume that he's running late.
Don't never assume anything, will I? But okay. Declarations of interest. But before I ask anybody else, I want to declare an interest in item 11 as the owner of properties that have the potential, unlikely, but to be affected by this report. I will leave the meeting for this item. Any other declarations of interest? Alistair?
Thanks very much, Leader. Just to say that I am a substitute member of Swestrans. It's mentioned certainly in item 10, also in certain other parts of the papers. I'm also, Leader, a member of Wigginshire Community Transport. I would want these noted, but they do not act, in my view, as an impediment to me participating in the consideration of the items in question. Thank you.
Brian?
Thank you. I declare an interest in item 10 also as a member of the Board of Swestrans, but I don't intend leaving the meeting.
Jim?
Similar to Councillor Geddes, I'm a representative in the Wigginshire Community Transport, but I don't intend leaving.
Jim?
Thanks, Leader. Similarly, I'm a substitute member of Swestrans.
Tom?
Swestrans, same reason as the Deputy Leader.
Okay, no other. Okay, we'll move on to item 3, which is the minute of the meeting of the 5th of November. This is for approval. I'll move it.
Happy to second.
Okay, moving on to item 4, which is the scrutiny of slippage in capital projects, criteria and identification of projects report by the Director, Chief Executive Services. This report provides members with a suggested new criteria under which capital projects should be referred to committee because of slippage. Members will be aware that there is an existing criteria whereby a project should be referred to the Scrutiny Committee. The Labour Group has expressed concerns in the past that this referral has not been taking place. This report suggests that process be scrapped and a new process introduced. The new process would mean that for contracts with a value of £500,000, of over £500,000, if the final account figure is 5% or more than the original sum, or if the contract period is between 26 and 52 weeks, there is a delay of 8 weeks or more. A full report is given to the Service Committee within 3 months. It also proposed that all projects with a total budget of £1 million or more will have a risk register. Based on the suggested criteria, all completed building contracts entered into since February 2011 have been reviewed against those criteria. Therefore, it is recommended that 2 projects, being Harthorn Road, New Children's Unit and the Brown Hall Primary School, are subject of reports to the appropriate committees. Could I ask Alex, Louise, if you've anything further to add to the report?
Nothing to add to the report, Leader. Quite happy to take questions. I could say the Brown Hall Primary School, I understand, was submitted to the Education Committee and was fairly closely questioned by members.
Okay, members. Ivor?
Thank you, Leader. With regard to the two items in 3.6.2 that are now the police and fire and the Scottish Police and Fire Services, was there anything in there that we should be sort of looking to see if there's a commonality between the two that are coming to our committees, and we might have got something out of that to say, well, actually, this is something that we could learn from?
Thanks, Gia. With those two specific projects, there were additional scope to what the police and fire had originally wanted, and there was quite significant changes to the project from start to end in terms of what they wanted. I think they were happy and satisfied with the end product that they got. There are similar issues that we have on some of our own projects where there can be scope changes during the course of the project, and I think that it has been specifically the case on the Brownhall Primary School project where there have been lessons learned from that, and obviously something that I would like to ensure that we're doing within Property and Architectural Services is learning as much as possible from these things and carrying them forward on to next projects so that we're not repeating any mistakes and learning the lessons that we need to.
Jim McComb.
Thanks, Leader. The Brownhall Primary School was indeed questioned quite extensively, but my recollection is that the contract figures quoted at the Education Committee meeting were rather different from the figures quoted here.
Can you clarify that, Louise?
Yes, I can, Chair. I think within the report to Education Committee, what was spoken of was specifically the total project cost. So that would include everything, not just the construction contract costs, but the fees, the furniture and so on, and anything outside of the contract. The criteria that I'm proposing here are specifically in relation to the extension of the contract period for a building contract or the increase to the contract sum. There's always costs outside of that, and I recognise that that's an issue for us going forward to make sure that we're keeping on top of these things and not going over budget, as well as construction costs increasing, which is why at paragraph 3.4.2 I'm making reference to that and to developing further criteria in relation to delays or increases that might occur prior to entering into a contract for the construction works. But I think there's quite a lot more work to do to see where we can improve there and put procedures and processes in place so that we're ahead of the game in terms of managing those risks and making sure that they don't occur. So that's something which is as covered at the last recommendation is for further development, but I certainly recognise that's an issue going forward.
Alistair?
Thanks very much indeed, Leader. My question, sir, is basically a simple one, but I'd crave your indulgence to be allowed to come back depending on the response. And it really relates, Leader, to the raft of revised criteria. What I'm really seeking is the assurance, in fact, that these represent more stringent tests than what currently exist.
Louise?
Yes, Chair, I would say that they do, particularly in relation to obviously post-contract spend now, where we've entered into a contract. They're more robust, they're more realistic. As I say, there's further work that we need to do in terms of any changes before we enter into a contract, but that's perhaps more about reporting and making sure that all parties are happy with what's going to be progressed. I'm not sure if that's answering the question, Chair.
Alistair?
Thanks very much, sir. Thanks for your indulgence. Just to say, and old habits die hard, I would say through you, sir, to Councillor Hislop, so forgive me. But I think it's absolutely imperative that we ensure that we get scrutiny embedded at the very core of this authority and all 47 members, whether it's area committees, service committees or corporate committees. I think we've got to get the message hammered home, Leader. By all means, in appropriate circumstances, stuff should be referred to the Scrutiny and Performance Committee, but too often in the past, it seemed to me, and I don't mean to be disrespectful to anyone, that has been regarded more often than not as the first port of call rather than the court of last resort. Let's do the business in the first instance, Leader, where in fact it should be done with a set of strength and criteria. As far as I'm concerned, that's a big step in the right direction. Thank you, sir.
Okay, Jane.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask about 2.4, the recommendation in 2.4, or the ideas behind that. If I've got this right, Brown Hall Primary School, for example, wouldn't have, it wasn't, its budget is less than £1 million, so it wouldn't have had a risk register. So what would it have gone through? What sort of steps would it have gone through if it didn't actually have an active risk register? Can we be assured that it wouldn't have slipped through a net simply because it wasn't big enough?
Please.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, that's a very valid point. Whilst I'm proposing, in line with the risk management policy, that we do adopt that strategy, which I think is already stated within that policy in terms of projects over £1 million, there can, of course, be risks on any project, regardless of the size. And those risks are not always necessarily simply to do with the building design and the capital works. It can be much wider risks in terms of ongoing revenue costs and meeting those, or the change in the business case, or even the removal of a business case for a project can sometimes disappear in development of a project. Whilst I've suggested that as a criteria, that's not to say that we wouldn't, on smaller projects like, for instance, Brown Hall Primary particular, where we're extending an existing asset, we would still take those risks into account and consider them and document them and monitor them within the project management process. That would certainly be the intention. But I think that the recognition in terms of £1 million projects is that can be such a significant project that it can be, projects of that sort of size can be something that create additional risks to the council that would maybe be of a greater impact than those of a smaller level than £1 million.
Jane, you want to come back in?
If I could, just for a practical question, which is about the total budget of 1 million. Is that talking about a cocktail of funding, or is it simply, is that simply the council's input? How we thresholding this?
Yeah, is it just council money?
That would be whatever if there was a project that was £1 million and it was fed in from other sources, it should still go through that formal process of documenting a risk register and then having it monitored on a regular basis, regardless of where the funding was coming from.
Okay, Jeff, I think you would.
I've just got a bit of a concern about how we define completion of a project. I mean, looking specifically at the new children's unit, we had the topping out ceremony a year ago, and it's due to be open this afternoon. So I would argue that a project isn't completed until such time as that facility comes into use. So I think we need to look at how we actually define, okay, the building may have been completed, but we haven't actually occupied and taken up possession of that, and this has been costing the council, I don't know how many tens of thousands of pounds a month while that unit hasn't actually been occupied. So I do think we need to look at the completion of the project as a whole, not just the building part of it.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I would agree entirely with that. The criteria that I've set down there are specifically in relation to the contractual matters. And as you say, even though a building may be deemed practically complete under a building contract, there are many other things to follow through, such as making sure there's a building control completion certificate, that the building's fully kitted out, that the staff that are going to be running it know how to operate systems and so on. And again, that's something going forward which I wish to review as I'm describing at 3.4.2, and if appropriate, bring back further criteria that expresses what we would refer to committee.
Thank you. Just one thing on the contract period between 26 and 52 weeks in length, and there's a delay of 8 weeks or more within that. That's 8 weeks for the 26 weeks and it's 8 weeks for the 52 52 weeks, up to 52 weeks as well, is, there's no like a graduation in there, like 26 weeks, 32 weeks or 30,
There isn't, Chair. I've proposed those based on the sort of typical types of contracts that we have at the moment, and the sorts of things that can happen on that sort of medium length 26 to 52 week contract. That if it's 8 weeks, that's 2 months. I mean, if you take it as a percentage of 26 weeks, that's obviously about 33%. But if you take it at 52 weeks, it's a smaller amount. But keeping in mind the fact that the length of a contract is very often directly related to the value of a contract, I think between this and the criteria described at 2.1, that there will always be that catch, if you like, that will mean that the project would be referred if it was heading into trouble.
It's just that I've seen contracts, 32 weeks and 26 weeks and 52 weeks, and all seeing the same criteria, same. But right, can we? Sorry, Ian.
Thanks, Leader. Just in regards to the previous policy was never really adhered to. We didn't receive any of them back, I don't think. How do we look after this and monitor this? I think it's fair we should give this a try. It's a different policy, different criteria here. How do members, do we look at this and again in a year's time to see has it been successful or not, or how do we watch this?
Well, certainly in terms of the monitoring of these 3 specific criteria, that's all actually relatively easy to do within the confines of property and architectural services, and also I would suggest in other contracts, such as roads contracts, for instance, because there is a day-to-day monitoring of that situation anyway, and officers will be aware of what's going on. And I, as the senior manager of anything that relates to, or the vast majority of building contracts, would be aware of that and keeping on top of that. We can certainly bring, if it's helpful annually or every 6 months, to bring forward a list of what has or hasn't fallen within those criteria, perhaps particularly what hasn't, obviously, because what has would be referred anyway. But that would maybe give members reassurance that we're keeping on top of monitoring the situation and reporting where we need to.
Yeah, Alex, you want to come in?
Thanks, Leader. We would be still submitting the normal capital monitoring reports, so it would become obvious to members from reading the monitoring report. But on top of that, the architects and property would be monitoring these contracts themselves and would report back to members. But members would see it by default in the capital reports anyway.
Yeah, Colin?
I think members would see it in the capital monitoring report, but that doesn't necessarily automatically mean we'll get a report on it. I think where the previous policy fell down is that we had a policy and not a single project was referred to scrutiny during the whole lifetime of that policy. So it's not just about having a policy, it's about actually implementing that policy. So we might be able to see the slippage in the capital report, but what's important is that the service committees actually get the report and are given an opportunity to find out the reasons for the slippage or the delays in the project, not just the fact that their slippage exists, because that's where the previous policy fell down. It was never implemented.
Ian, you would come back in.
Thanks, Leader. Colin covered it, the exact point I was going to make, but just how do we actually cover that from a member's perspective? Do we see an annual report just on this particular subject?
Alec?
Yeah, we'll bring forward an annual report, so yeah.
Okay, turning to the recommendations. Can 2.1, can we agree that for those contracts with a value of £500,000, the final account figure is 5% or more of the original contract sum, full report and the reasons for the increase will be referred to the relevant service committee within 3 months following the settlement of the final account? That's as in paragraph 3.5.4. Without me reading it all out again, can we agree 2.2? Can we agree 2.3? 2.4, can we note? 2.5, can we note? And 2.6, can we note? Ian?
Just so it's explicit, Leader, can we put in 2.7 that we receive an annual report on how it's being implemented?
That's fine, yep, okay. Right, moving on to item 5, which is the Farries building Dumfries business case report by Director Chief Executive Service. This is a report that provides members with a business case for the work proposed to the Farries building as part of the current capital programme. As members know, the Farries building has previously been considered for disposal but has been retained for a number of reasons set out in the report. Parts of the building are currently let to partner organisations which provide an income, and this potential will be extended. The office accommodation within the building has also been identified as a business continuity facility for the council and potentially for other partner organisations. It has also been used as an office furniture recycling point. This has so far resulted in an estimated savings for the council of at least £200,000. An analysis of the furniture reutilised since February 2013 compared to new furniture indicates a saving of £100,793. I'm just surprised there's no 50 pence at the end of that, over the past 8 months. So can I ask Louise if we've anything further to add to the report?
Nothing further to add, Chair. Happy to take any questions through yourself.
Jeff?
I mean, the Farries building's been back and forward to committee as long as I've been on the council, either for disposal or retention, and the fact that the region's archives to a large extent are stored in there is quite worrying when you look at the report here. Have we got any projection about how long we're going to need to retain the Farries building, or will at some point we need to, or will we be able to dispose of it? I don't see anything in here which says that we don't need it for 10 years, 20 years or 30 years.
Please.
I think, Chair, in terms of archives that are stored there, it's perhaps best to be clear that these are archive files in the main, and some of these are things that for a statutory purpose the council has to hold on to for quite significant lengths of time, and that's something that's always going to be the case. I mean, whether it's social work files or education files or contractual files. In terms of the investment in the building, we're obviously looking to make it as long-term as possible. We're sort of very conservatively estimating at least another 5 to 10 years. And I think in terms of future disposal, it's potentially too soon to call that short. But certainly, with investment in a building, it can obviously make it a more attractive prospect in terms of disposing of it at the end of the day, if that's what happens. But the council is always going to have some need for a storage facility of this type of nature to keep things that are statutory documents that it needs to hold on to, for instance. And clearly the particular use at the moment in terms of furniture storage and future disposal of that may not be such a long-term thing in terms of quantity, but this is a facility that the council is going to need for the future, and certainly in terms of the business continuity facility, that's something that should be there at all times for the council to have access to, and other organisations potentially.
Jane?
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you very much indeed. This is really very clear that we get a business case laid out with the options here, and I really do think that's a good way forward, because it hasn't always been the case that we've had that sort of thing. So thank you very much indeed, and I'll be looking forward to future reports receiving the same level of information. In box number 3, one of the options is to provide this service from an alternative leased location. And I just wondered, there's no sort of evidence here at all, and I would just like to know, it seems to me that it's £150,000 per annum to rent, and I wonder what figure you're working on. If one takes 1.5 million over 10 years, I wonder what you're working to.
Please.
Sorry, Chair, could I just clarify, is that in relation to the what that 1.5 million would relate to in a revenue lease building context for if we were leasing another building?
Exactly.
That would generally be obviously the rental costs that we'd face per year, the services, any rates that we would have for the building. And that's based, as you say, on approximately £150,000 a year, because looking at the nature of the building, the type of building it is, and having something equivalent from the rental market, that's what we would broadly estimate the annual running costs would be, Chair.
Okay, Gail.
Thank you very much, Leader. As Councillor Lever says, we've had reports on this building for a long, long time. And my recollection was that the social work services records were meant to be moving up to the Crichton at some point, or it was mooted that that would be an idea. And I wonder why that hasn't happened when we've got as much stock up at the Crichton. And it also makes me wonder why we've got technology solutions in at the Farries building as well, when they've got fairly significant buildings up in the Crichton site where they could perhaps have their own. And again, my recollection was that museums and libraries were possibly going to move to the yurt. Now, all of this has been muted, and yet we still seem to be hanging on to this building. And I just wonder if it is actually the best use of the building in the long term, over a 10-year period, and why we didn't look at shifting the social work stuff up to the Crichton as originally muted, probably about 2 years ago now, I would guess.
Okay, Alex.
In terms of the Crichton, we have buildings in the Crichton. None of them have been used for storage purposes. Effectively, what has happened is the stuff has been moved to the Farries building. I think as time has gone on, there's been talk about the archives, but the archives that will go to the Youth Library are the historic archives. They're not the archives of hundreds and hundreds of files that we're required to keep, as Louise says, for a considerable period of time. Ongoing, we're about to enter into a phase on records management, and members will be getting a report on records management. We're now going to have to manage our records much more appropriately. There is a requirement at law, which means we will have a turnover of files for the foreseeable future across the council, and the Farries building does offer that opportunity. I think a number of possibilities were mooted for different things. There were discussions, and we've now gone back and done the business case, and we think that it makes economic sense to continue to use the Farries building, because you will have a property, it's been sadly neglected, but you will have a property in the end of the day which is fit for purpose while the council wish to use it, and if we continue to maintain it, it will be a saleable asset at the end of the period. At the moment, if you put it in the market tomorrow, I'm not 100% convinced that you would like the price you would get for it.
Okay, Ian.
Thanks, Leader. I'm just delighted to see the support here today. I think it's the right thing that we're actually proposing to do, invest in this. I think it's 80 grand per year, or 86k per year. We're investing over the 10 years, so I think this is a good building. It's in the right place for a lot of logistical reasons, and at the end of it, we can get out of it no problem.
Finlay.
Thanks, Chair. Just a simple question. Are we planning to put solar panels on the new roof?
We're looking at all opportunities that we possibly can in terms of green options and renewable energies. I'm not going to definitively say absolutely yes, but it's certainly something that we're looking at just now in order to finalise the detail of what we're going to do within that £800,000. It's certainly a very strong option, and in making that decision we would obviously consider what it's doing in terms of minimising ongoing revenue costs as well as the initial capital costs.
So these avenues will be explored for best value. Tom?
Happy along with the recommendations, Chair, and the only point I'd make is that contained within the business case on page 31, it did point out a condition survey in 2010 identified that a sum of 836 was required to bring the building up to reasonable standard. So I'd hope that the figure in 2.2 in the recommendations of 860,000 is adequate. I hope we're not going to get any more surprises, because obviously an increase from 836 to 860 over 3 years ain't bad. I hope it isn't going to be any more than that.
just put a procedure in place that might deal with that earlier on. So. Okay, so if we move to the recommendations, can we approve the business case for the Farries building as detailed in the appendix? Note the revised funding allocations. Okay, thank you. Moving on to the Loreburn Hall offices in item 6. It's 43 Newall Terrace, Dumfries. This is a report by the Direct Chief Executive Service. Members are asked to consider a request from Galloway and Dumfriesshire to lease or license part of the office premises at 43 Newall Terrace, Dumfries at less than market value. The main issue that we're required to consider are the rental at less than market value and the proposal that Loreburn Hall be transferred to a community trust. Members will know that for a rental at less than market value, the Council requires to be satisfied that the lease will contribute to any of the purposes of economic development or regeneration, health, social well-being or environmental well-being in respect to the whole or any part of the area of the local authority or any persons resident or present in that area. Galloway and Dumfriesshire suggest that their organisation can provide community benefits set out in the Appendix 2 and 3. The issue of the Community Trust will be the subject of further reports to this committee and Dumfries Common Good Fund Subcommittee. Can I ask Louise if you have anything further to add to the report?
Nothing further to add, Chair. Happy to take any questions through yourself.
Ivor?
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy with the report and the recommendations, but I was just wanting a slight update, if it's possible, on the second bullet point in 3.1 to progress the legal process to release Loreburn Hall from common good in order that it can be transferred to a community trust. Has that process started?
Leader, yes. We've started the preliminary legal proceedings.
Okay, Jim.
Thanks, Leader. It's just in relation to the prospective tenant, Girl Guiding Dumfriesshire. Were there any other prospective tenants in the picture, or was this the only organisation which expressed an interest?
Alex?
Thanks, Leader. The Girl Guiding approached the council. The council has officers in that building at the moment. The discussion was ongoing in relation to the possible establishment of a community trust to take over the building, and Girl Guiding are part of that umbrella organisation. So they approached us and suggested that they would like to lease it, and the report's here for members to consider.
Jane?
Could you possibly tell me why are we moving? What's the logic and reason for us to move out of this in terms of an office management plan? What's the backup? Because I believe, looking at this, that there is a cost to be borne.
Alex?
Yes, we will be bringing forward a report to members on the rationalisation of the Council's office estate in Dumfries. The idea was that we move out of the Loreburn Hall. If we remained in the Loreburn Hall and it was transferred to a trust, we would obviously require to pay a rental for it. There is an argument that we should be paying a rental to the common good already, and our main plank of our office rationalisation is to move out of leased properties wherever possible to reduce ongoing revenue costs.
Okay, sorry, Jane.
May I please? I'd be interested to know whether the common good has been in receipt of a rent from the council. I mean, that's just well, it should have been. I go back to this whole business. It seems to me that we have put the cart before the horse in this one, have we not? We've decided that it's going to go to a community trust without actually having made that decision. And we've decided that we're going to give this building to a extremely worthy group. They've got innocently caught up in this, which is a governance issue, which I think has not been handled correctly. I don't follow the logic, and I don't see where the audit trail is, which actually supports this particular proposal. And I would like you to help me with this.
Well, number one, there's been no decision taken to transfer the hall to a community trust as of yet. That would be a member decision. Decision would require to be taken by members. There have been approaches by Loreburn Community Council and a number of other individuals in Dumfries who have expressed an interest in establishing such a community trust. Discussions are ongoing with officers, and they've been advised that once they have a business case and once they can show that they can actually run a community trust and have a community trust established, then the council will be asked to consider the transfer of the premises to them. There have been decisions taken as a consequence of which some preliminary work has been done in that respect. Those preliminary discussions have taken place at Dumfries Common Good Fund Subcommittee and have been reported on. In terms of the Girl Guides approached the council. Their logic appears to be that they are looking for premises in Dumfries. They have no premises at present in Dumfries. During their discussions about the establishment of the community trust, they thought it might be a good idea if they moved in there. We're merely bringing that report forward. I don't think there are any issues. I'm not sure the word innocently led into this, what you mean by that, Councillor Maitland, but certainly they approached us. There were no approaches made by any council officer to any organisation. They approached the council. We're bringing your report. It becomes your decision.
Gail?
Thank you, Leader. I tend to agree with Jane. I can see where she's coming from, particularly at 3.2 on page 35. The Common Good agreed to recommend to this committee that the building or the office should be leased to Girl Guiding until such times as the community trust assumes ownership. Now, we could be setting up the Girl Guiding Association into a facility on a lease to us for £1,000 a year, or to a lease to the Common Good for £1,000 a year, and they may find themselves getting kicked out in a year's time or 2 years' time once the trust is established. And I think we are very much putting the cart before the horse here. I have sympathy. They clearly need office space, but I just wonder if we could be setting them or the trust up in the future for problems.
That's why the Common Good Fund Subcommittee worded their recommendation to this committee as they did. They do not want to commit the trust, nor do they want to commit the Girl Guides. The Girl Guides are... They know what they're entering into here. They know what's happening in the background. It's really a member decision as to whether the Girl Guides get the lease of the building or not. It's for members to determine. But the bottom line is, please do not think the Girl Guides are being led by the hand or are being duped in any way. That is not the intention.
Just through you, Chair, the Leader. No, I wasn't stating that at all. But you well know that once organisations get into a building and maybe even invest a little bit in that particular office space, it's not so easy to get them out should the trust determine that they want to do something completely different with it. And I just feel that if this organisation needs some modest office space, should we not be looking at somewhere else to assist them at the moment while we're establishing the trust? But that's just my view. And as I say, I completely understand why the report's here.
Can I just say that the representative from Girl Guiding is here, and they're well aware of the risks involved in this, and they're perfectly willing to go forward on that basis. And I think it's a membership of about 1,000. I think it is 1,000 Girl Guides. So I think this meets their needs at the moment, and in the future we can guarantee nothing in the future, but they're willing to go forward on that basis. Colin.
Yeah, I mean, I think people are kind of missing the point. It was the Girl Guides that's approached the council to request to use this office accommodation. So the fact we should start a debate here today to start sending them somewhere else when they've not asked to go anywhere else seems a wee bit bizarre. I think certainly the discussions at the Common Good Subcommittee around the fact that the lease should only be until, or should a community trust take over, the reason for that was simply not to tie both parties' hands. We don't really have a right to say how the community trust run their business after they take over the running of the hall, and I think that's what that safeguard was put in for. But I don't think we should be trying to dictate to the Girl Guides that they should go elsewhere and we'll find them somewhere when they've actually made a request to us here today to consider the Loreburn Hall offices, and it's a case of, are we prepared to accept that request? And it seems perfectly reasonable to me.
I'll let you come back in.
Thanks, Leader. Can I just assure members the Girl Guide Association were offered an alternative. They were offered an alternative. I had the discussion myself with Mrs. Harrow.
Okay, Peter.
Thank you, Chair. Under 3.3, we're talking about a contribution towards energy costs. I wonder whether we could quantify how much we're prepared to pay?
Take it as much as they use, but Alex?
We would meter it, their usage.
What's the expected cost of that?
I think you know, it's how long's a bit of string. How many electric heaters have we got on and things? But it's, you know, I think the young guides have taken that into consideration, and you know, this is the way they see it as not an unacceptable way. Okay, can we turn to the recommendations? Sorry, Jane.
Sorry, I don't know at what point you want to go ahead. You're turning to the recommendations. I just want to say I would suggest to the committee that this actually is the wrong way round. You ought to get the trust sorted out. That's what you're going to do. And that's still got to be decided before you deal with anything else. Because I will also say that any sort of kindly arrangement with respect to property just leads to problems. Been through it often enough myself on an individual basis when one is being open-ended and kind and helpful. And I'm afraid good rules and absolutely clear statements of what is expected on both sides have to be sorted out. I'm sorry, it's not clear in this report, Chairman, so I suggest to you that we defer this and do not agree this at this stage.
Can I just reiterate that, you know, the Young Guiding Association is perfectly aware of all the circumstances within that, and they're accepting that. They're accepting that this is just until the community trust is, you know, up and going, and then they'll renegotiate or whatever they do. So, Tom.
Yeah, I mean, I think we had a good debate on this at the Common Good Committee, and one of the things was to ensure that both the rights of the common good and the rights of the Girl Guides, and also the rights of any future trust, were all protected. And that essentially is what this report is doing. I think that that this council made a decision in the previous incarnation that the Loreburn Hall was surplus to requirements. It was still being used by the council, and then we opened the can of worms that there's mention of a commercial rent in there, considering the council was only contributing £1,000 a year to the common good for the use of the entire hall, when they should maybe have been charged about 50,000 quid. So let's no go there. I think we've got a solution here. Girl Guides are happy, common good's happy, so what's the problem?
Jane, do you want to put a motion or an amendment to the recommendation?
I simply propose that you defer this until we have clarity on whether or not there is going to be a trust to take over this, and that is all sorted out before we agree this.
Do you have a seconder?
I'm happy to second, Councillor Maitland.
Okay, Ian?
Thanks, thanks, Leader. My question is in regards to the impact it would have on the Girl Guides themselves. That's not contained within the report. What I can see, if for some reason we do defer this, it's not agreed, what impact will that have in the future for the actual tenant?
Okay, Colin?
Just curious, the movers of the motion, are they proposing the council now begins to pay rent to the Common Good Fund for the use of those premises? And are they absolute, if I can finish, and also are we absolutely clear that the current use by the council very much has regard for the common good of Dumfries, which is what the building's there for in the first place?
You want to clarify, Jane?
I don't think I particularly need to. What the common good in Dumfries has or has not managed to negotiate with the council, I would suggest is their problem. I know what I think. It should have been sorted out long ago. And actual fact, this actually does have wider ramifications, because what goes on and what is decided with respect to a trust actually has ramifications for not merely the common good, it's public money, and it's also governance. It must be completely transparent about what is going on and why it's going on. And until that is out and open and on the table, I cannot agree to this.
Okay, we've got a motion to defer this item from June, which is seconded by Gail. Do we have an amendment to that motion? Tom?
Happy to move the recommendation as contained in the report, Chair.
So we've got an amendment. Is that seconded by anyone? Colin? Colin's second amendment. So we've got a governance officer, we've got a motion and amendment.
Everyone seems quite clear on what the motion and amendment are, therefore I will proceed to the vote. Leader?
Amendment.
Councillor Collins?
Amendment.
Councillor Carruthers?
Amendment.
Councillor Carson?
Motion.
Councillor Davidson?
Amendment.
Councillor Diggle? Councillor Geddes? Councillor Hislop? Councillor Lever? Councillor McGregor?
Motion.
Councillor Maitland?
Motion.
Councillor Marshall? He's left the room, sorry. Councillor McCottrey?
Amendment.
Councillor McClung? Councillor McComb?
Amendment.
Councillor Ogilvie?
Amendment.
Councillor Scobie? Councillor Smith? Councillor Tate?
Amendment.
The amendment is carried 15 votes to 3.
Okay, thank you. If we move on to the item 7, which is appointments to outside bodies. This report's by Director, Chief Executive Service, Director of Community and Customer Services. The report seeks approval for appointments to outside bodies in accordance with the Council Scheme of Representation in Outside Bodies. You will see the report as recommended appointment of substitutes where appropriate. Alex, do you have anything further to add on this?
No thanks, Leader.
Okay, open to members. Gail?
Sorry, it's just to seek a bit of clarification before we get to the individual outside bodies. Is this to be appointed from Policy and Resources Committee, or is it for the wider 47 members?
This, as far as my understanding, is it's policy resources first, and there could be recommendations to other if nobody from this committee has their name forward.
It's just that I'm aware that there are a couple of members who are interested in a couple of these outside bodies, but they don't sit on this committee, and I think it's really important to get people who are interested in it rather than just pinging folk on for the sake of populating them. So we'll see how things go.
So if there's no further questions on that, we'll just move to the recommendations and go through it one at a time. The first one is the appointment of one. Sorry, Councillor McCottrey.
I would move Councillor Mary McCutcheon for that particular one, Chairman.
Thanks, I haven't actually said it yet, but this is the Dumfries and Galloway Alcohol and Drugs Partnership. Is there any other nominations? No? No. Okay. So, moving on to the Dumfries and Galloway Community Safety Partnership, we're being asked for 3 members on this. Yep, we're at 3 members on this. Have we got any nominations, Jeff?
Ronnie Ogilvie.
Do we have a seconder?
Happy to second.
Ivor?
Councillor Ian Blake, I think would be interested.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Okay. Tom?
And Councillor Collins.
Okay, seconded by Rob. Okay, no other nominations. Ian?
It's no nomination, and I certainly know there's nobody from my group interested in this particular one, but Councillor Blake, does that get agreed here? Does that get referred to full council? I would imagine it get referred to full council because he doesn't sit on this committee.
No, I did explain at the start, if there's no nominations from the policy resources, then we can nominate somebody else if they... Okay, if they accept it, they accept. Okay. Okay, moving on to Dumfries and Galloway Women's Aid. Tom?
I'd move Councillor Joel Dykes.
I think, is there a seconder for that, or are there any other nominations from this committee?
Happy to second it, Chair.
Leader, I'm not convinced that Councillor Dykes wants to continue with that. We did discuss it yesterday, but maybe you know better than I. Sorry.
We sent an emissary to speak to her, and they came back and told us that she said yes.
The current person that's on it is Councillor Dykes. So, is there no other nomination from this committee? Then we have a proposer and a seconder. Okay. The next one is the Dumfries Prison Visiting Committee. We want one nomination from this committee, or if there's no nomination from this committee, is there any nominations from out with?
Thanks, Chair. Can I propose Councillor Alistair Witts?
I'm happy to second that, Chairman.
Is there any other nomination? No. Okay. Next one is the North Channel Partnership. You need 4 from this. Tom?
Could I move Councillors Ian Dick, Ivor Hislop, Jim McClung and Marion McCutcheon?
Ivor? Is that a seconder there?
I would thank Tom for his confidence in me, but I do know that Councillor Graham Nicholl was very keen to be on this, as it's the links through the North Channel Partnership, and if possible, he would rather be on that committee. And I would give up my place to allow him to be on.
Well, I'd move Councillor Nicholl in place of Councillor Hislop if he's happy to second that move.
Any other nominations? No? So, okay. Next one is the RFCA Lowland Reserve Forces and Cadets Association.
Thanks, Chair. Can I nominate Councillor Archie Dryborough?
Happy to second that.
Any other nominations? Okay, I think that's us through, is it? Oh yeah, 2.7, we're asked to consider arrangement for appointment of substitutes for attendance at outside bodies as detailed in paragraph 3.6. No, if we need substitutes, of course. Can we just agree that there can be substitutes on it?
Can I make a suggestion, Leader? The report was written on the basis that you might have not have willing volunteers. You appear to have many willing volunteers here, so it may be that the issue of substitution wouldn't arise, but we can address that through the subcommittee that's still got a piece of work to do on membership of outside bodies, if that were acceptable to members.
Roy?
That's fine, but I think we've got to recognise that some of these bodies have other nominations from other committees, which doesn't have substitutions, because it's substitutions only for a full council nomination. So maybe we've got to look at in the round.
Okay. Are you quite happy, Gail? Yeah. Okay. Can we move on to item 8, which is the European Parliament elections and Scottish referendum 2014, review of polling districts and polling places, report by Director Chief Executive. Phone Council on the 29th of August 2013 withdrew delegation from the Policy and Resources Committee and agreed to delegate to the returning officer to progress a statutory review of polling districts and polling places. This has now been undertaken and a summary of the responses is provided in the report. Both the European Parliament elections being held on 22nd of May 2014 and the Scottish referendum being held on the 18th of September 2014 will be conducted on the basis of local government areas. All responses were in favour of maintaining the existing polling district places. Members will know some of the previously used polling places for Wigton and Stewart may not be available for use in 2014. That's Stonykirk Village Hall, Airdurnestonrar, Surrey Village Hall, Waverley Hall, Creetown and Glenkens Community Centre, and alternative facilities have been identified where applicable. Members are therefore asked to delegate to the returning officer to make provision for suitable alternative venues as required in consultation with the local members. Can I ask Alex if you've anything further to add to the report?
Nothing to add. Happy to take questions, Leader.
Members? Alistair?
Thanks, Leader. I would simply move, sir, we adopt the recommendations in the report. So you're moving an amendment to that, right, Jeff?
No, it's just for clarification. I see electoral ward D, it says that the pupils will be... Sorry. Yeah. In 3.4, the proposal under Ward 4D, it says that the pupils will be away on a school trip. Is that for both days they're away on a school trip?
Yes, we organise trips locally for one class only. Because we only use one classroom, we have a way of separating schools. We have a number of schools now. Members will recall I tried to move out of all schools so that we weren't closing schools. We don't close the school now, we close one classroom, and we've been very successful over the last few years in collaboration with our colleagues in education in having school trips organised for primary 7 or whatever primary it is.
I never heard that. Finlay?
Just a question on the Castle Douglas and Glenkens. This is obviously the polling station in Dalry. I'm just questioning why the possible venues, alternative venues, are the fire station in New Galloway, I presume, and the Catstrand's also in New Galloway, but there's no mention of the town hall. Are these just suggestions, and the returning officer will actually look at those?
They were merely suggestions coming forward from staff, sir. I would prefer to find a venue in Dalry. I think somebody's assumed that Dalry was New Galloway. But I will find an alternative venue in consultation with the local members.
Okay, Alistair, you proposed the recommendations. Do we have a seconder? Colin? Any other? Okay, that's fine, it's agreed. Moving on to Dumfries and Galloway Police and Fire Rescue Services Reserves. This is a report by Director of Community and Customer Services. Members are asked to agree the proposals for the use of the reserves of the £929,000 retained by the Council in relation to the former Dumfries and Galloway Police and Fire and Rescue Services. You will recall that we previously agreed that this resource be used on community safety. The proposal here is to spend £310,000 upgrading existing CCTV facilities, enabling network connectivity and providing mobile CCTV. The proposal is for a risk management centre is at its very early stages, but there is every likelihood that the police who currently man the CCTV monitors may stop doing this as part of what appears to be a continuing erosion of services in our area. And one advantage of the proposed centre would be to provide a base for monitoring across Dumfries and Galloway. But obviously, members, I'm sure will want further reports on this issue. The report also proposes to use part of the reserves to provide additional civilian resource for the police to service a domestic abuse multi-agency tasking and coordinating group at a cost over 3 years of £193,000. There's negotiations ongoing for Police Scotland to ascertain if they will fund these thereafter. The funding from Police Scotland is not guaranteed, so the Council may have to bear these costs in full after the 3 years. The balance of £181,000 will be used to establish a community safety fund to deal specifically with community safety issues, which, if agreed, will be administered by the recently formed Community Customer Services Committee. Can I ask Ilse if you have anything further to add? And Richard, sorry.
We've nothing further to add, Leader. Just Elsa or myself happy to take questions.
Okay, members, Finlay, then Ivor.
Thanks, Chair. I note that the contractor has been appointed to install further CCTV in Sanquhar and Kirkconnell. Without stepping on the ward councillor for the area, I'm aware that Whithorn has over quite a number of years now looked for funding to install CCTV in the town there, with a view to linking up with Newton Stewart. There's no mention of Whithorn in this paper at all. Has there been a decision made not to look at that, or are they not aware that there's a demand for it in Whithorn?
It was discussed at Police and Fire Rescue Subcommittee. The issue of Whithorn, I believe there's an issue with the connectivity of taking the Cameron Images back to Newton Stewart, but there's been no decision made about that. This report is just the existing CCTV systems that we have, so there would have to be criteria set up and further discussions had about any expansion of the system. This doesn't include any expansion. Sanquhar and Kirkconnell, Kilhome, they already have, the communities have funding there to purchase the CCTV system already.
Brian.
Thank you, Leader. It's my understanding that there's a process in place for the pursuance of any area that looks to have a provision of CCTV. And I would suggest that is where the question of Whithorn belongs at this point in time in that process for assessment, along with the rest of the area. And as Elsa has just said, that doesn't form part of this paper that we have before us this morning.
Sorry, I missed you. Ivor first and then Alistair.
No problem. It was on the same subject, so I was happy to give way there. It was with regard to the remaining reserves. We're looking at 181,000 there. And in your preamble, you mentioned about the withdrawal of services in the area. One of those is the possible decriminalisation of street parking. Would this be something that we should be actually ring-fencing this money for at this stage? I think we looked at costs of 90,000 to work it up. Was it 200,000 to implement the running costs of 70,000 each year? Is this something that we should hold on to so that we have a reserve there if we have to go down the line of implementing this?
It's something to consider, yes, but you know, the money, the £181,000, I can understand where you're coming from, and I'll let other members come in at the moment, see what their views are. Colin? Oh, sorry. Alistair first.
Thanks very much indeed, Leader. It was just to reinforce the Deputy Leader's comments in relation to Whithorn. There is a process. I think it's absolutely imperative so that we do go through that process. And I would like to suggest that at the very core of the process, of course, is the relevant evidence to justify whether or not the provision of such a facility is essential. Let me say for the record, in relation to another matter recently, Leader, that I did get information from Police Scotland via the FOI legislation, and I think it confirms what an awful lot of us would say, that it's not a particularly high, in fact it's a low crime area, but that's not trying to preempt any future decision in relation to that particular location, Leader. Thank you.
Colin?
I mean, I got a lot of sympathy with what Ivor's saying, actually. I mean, that was one of the concerns I certainly had, that the fact that we do have a number of other changes potentially coming down the line and we don't have any funds available. As things currently stand, I mean, it seems to me Police Scotland's playing a very good game here. They're making all the cuts and we're picking up the bill for their services. I think if you look at 2.2, for example, we're effectively funding the employment of their staff. They're likely to remove traffic wardens, so we'll be left with a bill to deal with that particular problem. We don't know what's going to happen about the future of the control room in Dumfries, but the Chief Constable has made it absolutely clear that he only sees a future for 3 control rooms in the whole of Scotland. So, you know, we can just about second guess what the implications could very well be for this locality here. And is there anything we can do to try to work with Police Scotland in order to avoid that potential closure, for example? And these are all things that I think this funding certainly should be considered to be used for. So I don't have a particular problem with 2.1, but it's the rest of the funding that I'm slightly concerned about.
Okay, Jim.
Thanks, Leader. I would echo some of the concerns Councillor Smith has just mentioned with regard to the Risk Management Centre. I quite agree with the concept of a fully integrated risk management centre, but you're not going to have that because, as Councillor Smith just mentioned, the police and fire service have their own control systems. So, you know, it's not going to be fully integrated.
We have a number of services that we need to manage our own risk. We've never managed the police or the fire risk. What's being proposed here is an ability for us to use the technology to pull the range of services set out in 3.71 to a point, and all we're saying is that the CCTV monitoring in the risk management centre would then inform into wherever police and fire control rooms lie. Fire control room won't be in Dumfries and Galloway, and there's every likelihood in the future the police won't be here either. So it gives us the ability to perform that task, which is being quite rightly said, will not be pursued by police. Even just now, the CCTV just runs blind in a number of places because there are no police to monitor it. So therefore, what we're talking about here is development of a centre that brings together all of our 24-hour coordination and risk management of our vulnerable, and allows us to communicate directly with the police, wherever their control rooms might sit, as to where we have. But it's quite clear from the police moving forward that they wish to withdraw from this operation on a local level, as they have in other parts of the country. So this model we're talking about brings value on having, since we have staff monitoring Keilcor 24 hours, there's other things that could be monitored with properly trained staff and provide assurance. I think the other issue, Leader, is in broadband. Obviously, with an investment in broadband to communities such as Whithorn, there could be different methods of having lower level CCTV coverage going into this management centre, with use of webcams that would be able to go in. So even though this is the sort of hardwired version, moving forward, as we get broadband into our communities, we'd be able to have more coverage with the agreement of members at a much cheaper cost. But we'd need somewhere for that to feed into within the centre. And certainly for Whithorn, yes, there would be the business case, but Whithorn definitely be an area covered by Superprass broadband in the next 2 years. It's one of the nodes that will be covered. So I'd have to say that this would allow us to directly report into wherever the police sit, but we shouldn't get away from the fact that the police control room, the police do not wish to continue to operate this.
I think that's a difficult situation where we are. The council has an obligation, it has a duty of community safety as well, and we're being put in a position where we are, not through our own choosing how to provide that, and Police Scotland will withdraw from that, and it's whether, and we're actually being now asked to do that and then report to the police if you want, give the police that information rather than them doing it themselves. Jim, the other Jim. Yep.
Yeah, thanks, Leader. I want to turn to page 63, 3.87 onwards. It won't surprise you to know that I would fully support the multi-agency tasking and coordinating the admin assistant and the advocacy support officer. However, when you actually read through this, the box that's under 3.8.10 says total Police Scotland costs. That's not true. That's our costs. We are going to be giving them the 193,000. We are going to be giving the police, because it does say that they'll be employed by Police Scotland, are going to be giving the police 2 members of staff that the council are paying for, and from previous knowledge, once the police actually employ somebody, The police can put them anywhere they want, unless we have some sort of written guarantee that those two staff will be within Dumfries and Galloway. They are police staff, therefore under the control of Sir Stephen House.
Gavin?
This came forward from the local commander and supported by the local fire commander. And my understanding is if we agree to do this, that these additional resources would be specifically identified in the local police plan that would come forward to this council for agreement and would require the council's agreement before it be moved off it. The police chief constable, quite rightly, has the ability to move resources, but he would have to do that directly against the agreement of the council. But that was the understanding at this point.
Jim, you want back in?
Yeah, regarding the local policing plan, that also has to be agreed by the Chief Constable. So therefore the Chief Constable can change it from reading the legislation. If the council don't agree with what the Chief Constable says, they don't really think there's anything the council can do about it.
Alex?
Leader, if it helps, we can put appropriate governance arrangements in place to ensure that there's a contract between the police and the council on it. That would be how, I think that was how the Chief Executive was envisaging it would happen.
As long as it's a watertight contract.
So it's used in D&G only? Yeah. Okay. Ivor, I know you put forward an idea there. Is there a proposal in there somewhere? Is there?
Chair, it may be better that wouldn't cover the cost, but if it's recognised that that may be a cost that comes forward in the future for community safety, that it's a calling shop that we can go to this fund. So if that would be acceptable, I'd be happy with that.
Okay, can we go to the recommendations? Sorry, Jane.
I'm just going to ask, the Risk Management Centre, you won't be surprised that I slightly look at this and think to myself, oh dear, providing a central location for public space CCTV. Now, everything's being centralised at the moment, and I would suggest that it is a possibility that doesn't have to be centralised.
And where would you see it?
Well, that's up to us to decide, isn't it, Leader? But not just assume. Yeah, indeed, Whithorn, precisely. Why not? This is the sort of thing I mean, as to that there is an assumption in there that it's going to be in Dumfries. That's just the unsaid assumption. And I'm suggesting, I think we should actually check that out, that it has to be there, before we simply accept it as a done deal.
Alex?
Leader, clearly the proposal is at very early stages. All we're asking is that a sum of money be earmarked. We will bring members back a business case setting out the pros and cons in the same way as we did for the Farries building. So happy to assure the member that we will bring back a business case which will contain options and a recommendation. It's in its very early stages yet. There's no assumptions been made.
Jim McClung?
Yeah, it was just a question I asked at another committee that I was at. If you put all your resources into one place, that is by definition centralisation. Centralisation does not necessarily mean that it has to be Dumfries. You can centralise elsewhere than in Dumfries. You can centralise in Kirkcudbright, for instance, but it will be a centralised service. It doesn't necessarily mean to say it has to be Dumfries.
I think you're right, but I think it's best value and it's where the infrastructure might well be to facilitate that. Okay. Councillor Hall over there.
Just to add to the debate, if the threat of the closure of the central control room from the police, and Loreburn Street is already set up with CCTV, if Loreburn Street becomes available, then there's a whole suite of stuff there that's already got the hardwire. If Fannin has CCTV and it gets refurbished, and it can't be manned all the time, but there's somebody who could man it in Dumfries and keep an eye on Annan, I can't see anything wrong with that, and I'm sure that's the same for lots of communities, Gretna and others that have got the CCTV in my area.
Any other bids? Gail?
Just as an aside, can we make it a matter of priority to get a CCTV camera on my sheep? Because some jokers seem to think they look better with red moustaches, and it's costing me an absolute fortune in acetone.
I'll pass on that one. Jim?
Yeah, I would agree with Councillor McCochtry. However, the unfortunate thing is the control room that they're talking about shutting isn't actually in Loreburn Street and doesn't handle the CCTV. The CCTV is handled from Loreburn Street. The control room is actually in the old police headquarters building. It's two different buildings. But it is an especially good idea if you could use the area within Loreburn Street, but then Police Scotland would probably look for a rent office.
Thank you. Can we move to the recommendations? Sean?
Yeah, Chair, I just wondered if we could have a list of all the places that we do have CCTV in Dumfries and Galloway.
Yes. Okay. Can we move to the recommendations? Recommendation 2.1. This is to, I'll now agree the proposals for the use of reserves in relation to CCTV in terms of addressing the current requirement to ensure fully functioning CCTV systems and develop options to deliver mobile CCTV as described at stage 1 at a cost of £310,000 as detailed in paragraph 3.8.1 of this report, and in principle for stage 2 the development of an integrated risk management centre with a projected contribution from police and fire reserves of up to £250,000 as detailed in paragraph 3.8.5. Can we agree 2.2 and 2.3? Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to item 10. This is Development of Services Commission report by Director of Community and Customer Services. The report provides members with an update on progress with the commissions that were agreed to be developed by this committee on the 4th of December 2012 using the former third sector strategic budget. As the report indicates, there have been a number of developments since that decision was taken. Firstly, in relation to the CCS officers are recommending that commissioning is held in abeyance pending the outcome of the CLD service review, which will cover this budget area. In other words, it could well be that we agree to commission something at a certain level today, but when we see the outcome of the service review, the recommendation in relation to what we commission and at what value could be very different. Therefore, a commission at this stage is premature. Likewise, the services being commissioned in social work are also subject to review in 2014. And the report states that in relation to the PHES, is it EEI now? There have obviously been a resource issue in relation to the preparation of commissions. There are also recommendations regarding taking credit union services out of the commission process and for a grant of £961 to be paid to advice and information services for people with dual sensory impairment. I don't think that this is an ideal situation, but it seems logical to await the outcome of service reviews before we commission some of these services. I also think there is a real issue regarding the fact that several departments commission services in the same subject area, for example, employability, and what we should be looking at is rationalising the process. Officers have recommended any decisions regarding rollover funding should await the budgetary process. The administration is, however, of the view that in order to avoid uncertainty in the third sector, a decision should be taken today to roll over these funding schemes for one financial year. This will avoid any need for the issue of redundancy notice amongst our third sector partners and provide certainty for the third sector organisations involved in at least until March 2015. However, we should also wish to ensure that the CLD service review is completed before we consider any commissions in these areas this time next year, so we have the results to help inform future commissions. We need to consider whether we actually commission certain services or whether there are other ways to provide a service working with our partners in the third sector. I would also want to see proposals to rationalise the process, which at present means several council departments commissioning services in the same subject area. Finally, I would seek an assurance that the resources will be put in place in departments to ensure that this time next year we don't receive any reports saying that commissions can't be pursued because they haven't been fully developed. Can I now open up the meeting to member debate? Ivor?
Thank you, Leader. It's just under the commissions to be led by SWS. We have the table 2 reasons for proposed postponements of SWS-led commissions. Now, my understanding is we're looking at budget reductions this year coming, plus the 2 future years. And if you look at the reasons there, what sort of comfort can you give members that by the 1st of April 2015 we will be able to do the commissions? Because the same reasons could be given next year, that budget cuts may affect what's happening and the year after.
Councillor, speaking on behalf of Social Work Services, as you'll be aware, we have a number of service reviews that were taking place. Our concern is that we don't miss out any of the vulnerable people that we have a legislative requirement to support, but which we do through a commissioned service. We are fully supportive of that direction of travel, but we actually need, and it's unfortunate that we need it, but we have to be honest, we need the additional time to make sure that when we sort out our own service reviews, that we can then construct in conjunction with other parts of the council appropriate arrangements to make sure that the work that we require to have done is done and that it's done within the budget that's available to us. So it's really about the pressure on officers at the moment to make sure we get it right, and it's too important for us to take the risk of getting it wrong by doing it too quickly.
Okay, no other members. Can we turn to the recommendations? Can we agree on 2.1 that the community and customer services, social work services and planning environment services should not take forward the operational commissions as agreed on 4th of December 2012 to allow the CLD service review to take place in 2014, and a functional review added in of the funding of all third sector organisations. Can we agree? And can we agree to take the credit union services out of the commissioning process? 3, can we agree to provide rollover funding for 1 further financial year from 1st April 2014? Can we remove the budget setting part of that, within that, subject to budget setting, because and just have the scrutiny and organisational and monitoring information so the budgeting process can go forward without that ambiguity. Okay. Can, for the funding of £961 subject to budget setting for advice and information services of people with dual sensory impairment be provided as a grant for next year and going forward by social work services rather than a commission as was previously agreed?
Remove budget setting.
And, sorry, and remove the budget setting part of it. Okay, thanks very much. Move on to item 11. This is, remove myself from this, I've declared an interest. Right.
Okay, thanks, Lena. Item 11 on the agenda, the revenue services. Can I ask Mr Lynch, do you have anything you'd like to add to the paper at this time?
Thanks, Chair. Nothing further to add to the paper. Myself and Lorna Campbell are happy to take any questions. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Councillor Carruthers.
Thanks, Chairman. Just in regard, things up my way from me. Just in regard to the clarity on unoccupied long-term, we're looking to raise it. It's under Appendix 2. So I take a chance to get caught up. It's just if we can get an overview of what that actually is. I got confused a couple of times through it. I think I've got my head around it now. But just to be absolutely sure what that means in there, because I've had quite a few different inquiries in the past. So get clarity on that, please, John.
Mr Lynch.
Thanks, Chair. If I picked up Councillor Carruthers correctly, he was asking for confirmation about the type of properties that would be subject to this additional charge. Yeah. Essentially, what we'd be looking to do under by adopting the provisions, the discretionary provisions in the Act, would be to apply an additional 100% charge to those properties deemed to be long-term empty properties. There are certain exemptions within the statute, and they're summarised in Appendix 3. But assuming that none of the exemptions apply, that the charge will be applied. And the policy driver is, from Scottish Government level, is to enable local authorities to encourage owners of long-term empty properties to bring them back into use. And so it's a kind of carrot and stick approach. The approach that we're adopting is to link the revenues team with the strategic housing service, and the empty homes officer would work alongside revenues colleagues, where we would be looking at the charges, looking at the status of the property, applying charges where appropriate, but also providing advice and assistance to owners to bring those properties back into use.
Thank you, Councillor Carruthers.
Thanks for that, Chairman. Just so for absolute clarity, it was the second homes in the long term unoccupied. That's quite clear. A second home doesn't come into the 200% bracket, does it? It comes into the 50 and 10%, I think.
Mr Lynch.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just to clarify, purpose-built second homes would remain at 50%, and second homes that are used for personal second home use would continue to receive a 10% discount. These are long-term empty properties that we're looking at applying the charge to.
Thank you. Councillor Diggle.
Thank you. Just on Appendix 2, the bullet point number 3 down, at the end it says in brackets, or up to a maximum 50% discount. I just wasn't clear what that meant.
Mr Lynch.
Thanks, Chair. This is just a summary of all the provisions that are allowed for within statute. We're not proposing to apply that charge locally. I think that's the position. Maybe if yes, that's the kind of range that can be applied through statute. But what we're proposing is to apply 100% charge immediately for any property that's long-term empty for more than 12 months, but applying the exemptions that are listed in Appendix 3.
Thank you. Councillor Carson.
Thanks, Chair. Obviously welcome this report, because anything that can get rid of the scourge of empty properties in our town centres and whatever is certainly to be welcomed. And you know, to have the opportunity to try and force land laws to bring these properties back into use has got to be welcomed. One concern I certainly have is at the 12-month limit. I understand that's the minimum for this to be applied. The sort of scenario I think where there could be issues is where a property comes into ownership of via a will or whatever, and there's got to be an estate split up or whatever. 12 months is certainly not a long time for anything like that to be resolved, especially in the current climate where people, if they're trying to maximise the value of their properties, you know, even seasonally, 12 months doesn't give very much flexibility. on the back of that, the officer is going to have discretion of whether they apply these exemptions or extensions to the time. I would imagine that there'll be very many appeals, if you like, for properties that have just become unoccupied in a 12-month period. I would suggest that the 12-month period is actually extended to 24, because it would then take those people that were going through a selling process or whatever out of the equation altogether and reduce the workload that the officer's going to have to do. Because I imagine most of the workload at looking at the discretionary powers of the officer are going to be involved in properties coming up within 12 months.
Thank you. Mr Lynch.
Thanks, Chair. The proposed scheme already suggests that there would be an exemptions for 24 months for any properties that are being actively marketed either for sale or for rent. So if an individual can evidence that they are seriously trying to sell or to let the property, then an exemption would apply. However, if it's for members' discretion to decide whether or not a 12 or a 24-month trigger would apply, it's your decision. What we've proposed in the report is that the 12 months, which is the route that we should go down, but members can decide to vary that. The regulations allow for variation.
Councillor Geddes.
Thanks very much indeed, Deputy Leader. The question I would want to put to Mr Lynch is one of clarification, sir. We talk here about unoccupied properties, but we also talk about homes, etc. What's the status, Deputy Leader, of a property which may, in fact, have been acquired for conversion to housing accommodation, may, in fact, already have planning consent, but at the end of the day, nothing particularly material seems to have occurred, albeit the planning consent, there's been a certain amount of work done, the planning consent is still outstanding and will remain active in perpetuity. What, would these proposals apply to properties or subjects of that nature, sir? Or is it purely homes?
Thank you. Mr Lynch.
Thanks, Chair. If Councillor Geddes, when he refers to properties that are subject to conversion, means that they are not habitable, then these provisions wouldn't apply in those situations. So if you've not got basic amenities in the property, then they wouldn't apply in those circumstances. But if a property is empty but could be used as a home, then they would. That would be the test.
Thanks, Deputy Leader. That's very helpful.
Councillor Carson.
Thanks, Chair. It was just to come back on the point. I presume as soon as a property has been empty for 12 months, I'll automatically get this charge applied to them. Where I'm coming from is that after 12 months, if they automatically get that, you're going to get a high percentage of those people appealing, if you like, because they are going through this selling process. I don't think 12 months is a unduly long time for a property to sit empty, and I think this whole policy is to make sure that we free up long-term unoccupied, and I don't think any stretch of the imagination you can say 12 months is long-term. Why I'm proposing that we look at a period of longer than 12 months is because the council then won't have to deal with all the appeals that are inevitably going to come in, because 12 months is not a long period, and actively marketing, and it's just going to increase the workload. I don't think anybody here would accept that a property being unoccupied for 12 months is long-term unoccupied.
Thank you. Mr Lynch.
Thanks, Chair. Before any additional charges levied, we will be going through a verification process, and that's summarised at 3.17 of the report, the covering report. So it wouldn't be a case of the council just applying charges without any understanding and intelligence and information about the status of the property. However, I go back to my earlier advice that it's for members to decide whether the trigger would be 12 months or in all cases apply a 24-month. trigger to apply the charge. The report recommends 12 months, but it's within your gift to vary that.
Thank you. Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, Chair, it's to seek clarification on what has been said, and questions have been asked in terms of the difference between an unoccupied property and a home. And I make reference to what Councillor Geddes said. Past practice was, as far as I understand, that if a property received from environmental health, that the house was, or the property was below tolerable standard, then that was not charged, then council tax was not charged on that property. That was drawn back on. And here we have, as John rightly says, in 3.17, a method, if you like, of bringing these properties back into use. Particularly in the last bullet point, establish if there is any way in which we may be able to help the owner, for example, by helping them to access help and advice on renovations, loans, grants, and for repairs or finding a tenant. I can think of one property it's smack dab in the middle of Stranraer that would dearly love the application of 3.17, and indeed other properties in Stranraer that were empty for many years, and the owners on purchase were hoping to bring it back in as additional homes, and indeed a further property that had, what I referred to earlier, an environmental health notice that it was below tolerable standard and subject to demolition. Where does all these fit in terms of charges that are made and the measure that you refer to, John?
Thank you. Mr Lynch.
Thanks, Chair. I can maybe respond to the issue around demolition orders and then maybe ask Lorna to clarify in terms of the revenues position on council tax charge. In terms of either a demolition or a closing order, the property needs to be deemed to be uninhabitable, and the householder has clear intentions to demolish the property. And in those circumstances, a demolition order is served, and that then requires the owner to carry out those demolition works. What happened, I think, in the past was that demolition orders were placed essentially to hold those properties in abeyance to allow the owners not to have any charge applied to the properties at all. So we've gone through a process of scrutinising the demolition and closing orders and lifting them where appropriate. So a demolition or closing order should only be placed on a property if it requires to be demolished, closed if it's an adjoining property that cannot be demolished, but a closing order and demolition order basically prohibits an owner from occupying or allowing anyone else to occupy the building. So that's the position in terms of the orders. In terms of the charge regime, maybe if Lorna can assist on that. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, John. Where a property is placed by the assessor in the council tax register, we would bill it, and these regulations would apply to it. So where it had been, it was a property that was unoccupied but was still needing some repair, but had been unoccupied for over 12 months, then these new charges would be applicable to it.
Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, the point on the last bullet point in 3.17 establishes if there's any, in terms of grants and so forth. As I say, there is one in the middle of Stranraer that would dearly love to think that grants were available. It's what sort of work would be entailed and the efforts put in from the council side.
Mr Lynch.
Thanks, Chair. The assistance and grants regime is set out under the council scheme of assistance. So there's a current scheme of assistance that was agreed in March of this year by the Housing Subcommittee that provides for properties that are potentially BTS, but a higher threshold than the statutory BTS regime. So the council have set its own level to allow direct financial assistance. That scheme of assistance is reviewed every year, and a further report will be coming back to the Housing Subcommittee in March of next year, and obviously take account of any changes made in relation to the arrangements for long-term empty properties, and that will inform the policy development of the Housing Subcommittee.
Councillor McClung.
Yeah, thanks, Deputy Leader. I'm thinking about a specific property in my own ward that relates to what Councillor Scobie and Councillor Geddes was saying. Former licensed premises whose use has been changed to residential. But for some considerable time now, the owner of the property has just failed to do any work with inside the building to make it habitable, and merely uses it as a store. What's the position if you have an empty building that has now had a change of use from licensed premises to residential, and the owner of the property fails to engage with the council to even look at grants to make the property habitable? He's literally just letting the building sit there empty to become an eyesore.
Mr Lynch.
Thanks, Chair. In those circumstances, the Council could look to utilise powers under the 2006 Housing Act to either place a closing or a demolition order on the property that would then compel the owner to carry out necessary works to bring it back into use, or if a demolition order, to actually demolish the property, and it would then compel the owner to engage with the council in those circumstances.
Thank you. Councillor McClung.
And if the property in question happens to be a listed building, and it's not the one that Mr Haswell's actually thinking about, it's the one across the road with the scaffolding outside it.
Maybe a matter for discussion further with officers. Mr Lynch.
I think in those circumstances, obviously, we'd need to talk to planning colleagues in terms of listed building status, but we can still ensure that enforcement action is carried out. But obviously, if a building's listed, it adds an extra level of complexity into what we do, but it doesn't remove the council's powers to serve the order. It just means that there's further consideration and a more kind of complex discussion needs to be had.
Thank you. Councillor Geddes.
Thanks very much, Deputy Leader. It's another request for clarification. Paragraph 3.14 this time, sir. We're talking about an appellate arrangement being built into the system, and it's right and proper that that should be the case, but the reference is made to the Valuation Appeal Committee in this particular instance, sir. Can we have can I have my memory refreshed as to what the composition of such committee is? Thank you.
Valuation Appeal Committee hears appeals for both council tax and the assessor, and is made up of, and memory serves me correct, it's people from the local community, but the exact constitution, I'd have to double check for you, I'm sorry.
Thanks, Deputy Leader. In other words, from the local community, but not of the local authority, which is right and proper, you know, if you're going to have a meaningful appellate system. Thanks for the information. Thank you.
Maybe from a legal point of view, Councillor Geddes, it's the old valuation appeal, and it goes through from a local appeal. There is a process, a statutory process through which it goes eventually to the valuation appeal court, or a part of the court of session. So it is a well-established appellate system.
Thank you. I'm assuming that clarification on the specifics will be forwarded. Thanks very much. Councillor Lever.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate where Finley's coming from in terms of properties tied up in probate, but at least you'd have evidence that this was going to be the problem, so it could go to appeal. And I'm surprised we've got nearly 1,000 properties which fall within this definition in a region like Dumfries and Galloway. We have such a chronic problem, like a lot of other areas, with homelessness. And therefore, I think I'd stick with the 12 months before this kicks in, because it does at least give an incentive to a property owner to actually begin getting that property back into use, either through sale or rent. And given we have an appeals process, I think I would definitely stick with the 12 months rather than 24 months. 24 months, a property could become uninhabitable if it's been standing empty for that length of time.
Thank you. Certainly the officer has reiterated and reasserted his recommendation of 12 months there, but we'll come to that in the recommendation. No other member looking to speak? No. Can we now go to the recommendations? 2.1, note the new powers to progress the variation in the council tax charge for long-term empty properties is detailed at 3.3 in Appendix 2. Happy to note. Finally, you want to take forward your motion?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I question the value for money on the council's basis of taking properties before the 24-month period in terms of looking at even property reviews at the 12-month point, but also processing appeals thereafter. So I would like to put forward the motion that we agree to option 2 with changing the limit from 12 months to 24.
Happy to second.
Thank you. Councillor Lever.
In that case, I'll put forward the amendment that we stick with the 12 months.
Okay, so we're quite clear then that the motion is to have 24 months before this kicks in, and the amendment is as the recommendation, which is 12 months. So we'll proceed to the vote. Deputy Leader?
Motion.
Councillor Carruthers?
Sorry. Amendment. Sorry.
Amendment. Amendment.
Councillor Carson?
Motion.
Councillor Davidson?
Amendment.
Councillor Diggle? Councillor Geddes?
Amendment.
Councillor Hislop? Councillor Lever? Councillor McGregor?
Motion.
Councillor Maitland?
Amendment.
Councillor Marshall?
Amendment.
Councillor McCottrey is still out of the room. Councillor McClung?
Amendment.
Councillor McComb?
Abstain.
Okay. Councillor Ogilvie?
House? Oh, sorry, amendment.
Councillor Scobie? Councillor Smith?
Amendment.
Councillor Tate?
Amendment.
Okay. The amendment is carried 13 votes to 3.
Thank you. Going on to recommendation 2.3, agree that the discretion to allow modifications to different classes of case be delegated to the Principal Officer of Revenue Services on a case-by-case basis, and that this discretion be used on an exceptional basis. Agreed? Thank you. 2.4, agree that implementing the full penalty of £500 for owners who fail to provide information when requested or knowingly do not report being uncharged. Agreed. 2.5, note that the additional set-up costs which will be incurred, estimated at £48,000, are reflected in Appendix 1, are offset against the income generated. Noted. 2.6, agree to fund a new permanent post of empty homes officer at an estimated cost of £40,000 to be funded from the additional income generated as a result of the increased council tax charge applied to long-term empty residential properties. Agreed. And 2.7, agree that the existing level of funding to support affordable housing is maintained to allow the council to continue to support key projects identified through the local housing strategy and strategic housing investment plan. Agreed. Thanks very much. We ask the leader back in.
Thank you. Moving on to item 12, which is the Director's 6-monthly assessment of Chief Executive Services Business Plan Performance, report by Director of Chief Executive Service. This report provides members with the Director's assessment of the 6-monthly progress on delivery of the 2012-15 business plan for the Chief Executive Service. It's basically a self-assessment on progress and is here for member scrutiny. I'm going to ask the Director if he has any areas of concern or issues which he wants to highlight for members before taking questions.
Thanks, Leader. The management team's right behind me, you'll see. I've nothing really to add to the report, Leader. We have got a total of 35 key performance indicators in the Chief Executive Service. 13 of them are corporate performance indicators in that they apply to the full council. The other 22 are departmental. I've listed 8 exception reports and provided explanations to members as to what we're doing to address what is an area where a target has not been met or is not within what we perceive to be an acceptable limit. I just wonder, I'm happy to answer members' questions, or I know people who will answer members' questions, Leader.
Okay, members. Ira?
Couple of questions. Page 105. It's the percentage of requests for personal information completed within 40 days. Within the improvement action, there's a reference there that through the summer months, the number of requests went down, and then in September, there's been a marked increase. Is there a reason for that marked increase? Does it happen yearly, and should we be looking to staff up accordingly in that one? And the other one was a bit of information with regard to 106. We have the indicators there for average number of days lost, and then we'll go down to how are we performing at the top of page 107. The dates in there, are they yearly figures or are they half-yearly figures? Because if you look at averages, there's none of the figures there less than the average value. So they're all above it, so you'd have thought the average would have been higher.
Leader, Councillor Hislop's quite correct. The stuff at the top of page 107 are yearly figures. The correct figures are the ones in the graphs. Insofar as social work is concerned, we're not aware of any pattern to it. Clearly, social work inquiries for information can be quite complex and quite detailed. We do need to train further staff up to deal with the number and volume of requests that's being received.
Jane?
It's not really a question, but it's a Freudian slip in 3.5, paragraph 1. I absolutely endorse the notion, but I don't think we get this target. And the target for the highest paid 5% earners being women exceeds the target. I'm impressed, but I don't think that's quite what was meant.
I'll accept that, sir.
Okay. No other members? Can we go to recommendations? We've reviewed the overall summary of performance for Chief Executive. We've scrutinised the exception reports. Can we note the overall summary of health and safety for April and September? Right. Okay. Moving on to item 13. I've got a feeling there's a sting in the tail somewhere. Okay, moving on to item 13. It's the Director's 6-monthly assessment of business plan performance, community and customer services report by Director Community and Customer Services. The report provides members with the Director's assessment of 6-monthly progress and delivery of the 2012-15 business plan for the Chief Executive Service. As with the previous report, it is basically a self-assessment on progress and is here for member scrutiny. Again, I'm going to ask the Director if he has any areas of concern or issues which he wants to highlight for members before taking questions.
Leader, members will note there's 50 key performance indicators and 10 projects contained within the plan. The vast majority are on target. We've 10 areas of concern, and they are contained in the exception reports. Members will see that we in a number of areas here, we have been measuring what we perceive to be the wrong thing. We're not changing the indicators because we can't achieve them. We're changing the indicators to make them more realistic. So, for example, in terms of debt management, a number of people helped with debt. Rather than looking at a figure of, I think it's £11 million, we're actually going to look at the number of people who have been helped, rather than the amount of money which has gone through. Likewise, we have to take account of the closure of DG1 and the changes in the operation of DG1 in some of the indicators we've brought forward. Museums and libraries are down, and once again, the management team will answer any member questions on the specifics of these issues.
Okay, members. Either.
It was actually with regard to the value of debt managed, the one that Mr Haswell mentioned. Within, I know that it's not there, but have we seen an increase in the number of people? Or is it just that the value of debt has reduced in Dumfries and Galloway? You know, because it's saying that we've got down from a target of 13 and we're a value of 10 million. Now, is that a case of we're actually putting people through the process and managing their debt better, therefore the debt's reducing, or is it a case of fewer people are coming to us?
Thanks, Chair. No, there's a clear difference between overall total of debt managed and the number of cases that are being dealt with. The reason for the total amount of debt not increasing significantly is to do with a contraction in lending, mostly. But the number of cases that are being dealt with has increased. So in April, there were 338 cases that were being dealt with through the Commission service. That's now risen to 657 as at the end of October. So there's a significant increase in the number of cases, although the debt per case will be less because of the contraction in lending facilities.
Okay, another member. Moving on to the recommendations. We've reviewed the overall summary in Appendix 1. Scrutinised the exception report in Appendix 2. Can we agree the proposed amendments to the performance targets, Community Customer Services Business Plan 2012-15 as detailed in Appendix 3? Good. Sorry, Councillor Carruthers.
Thanks, Leader. Just in regard to it, was the last point. It's when it comes to the actual commission itself, because this money advice service will go through a commissioning process as we go forward. In regards to the financial target, it's already been picked up on. It's not really a good way to monitor it. But see, when we do monitor the outcomes for this, the people who are taking the money advice service, it's economic development referred to as being a positive destination at the end of it. How will we reflect through the commissions where the people arrive at after this advice? What's the outcome for them? How have they benefited from the advice?
Thanks, Chair. As members will know, that at the last Policy and Resources Committee, the new Commission for Advice and Information Service was agreed. As part of that specification, we've revised the performance management information, and we're looking for it to be much more responsive, to be kind of client-focused. And one of the things that we'll build in is kind of customer satisfaction measurement, so we can get information direct from those clients who've gone through the service to advise how they think it's assisted or otherwise. And that'll be built into the monitoring arrangements and reported back through to members.
Okay, agree the recommendations. Okay, moving on to item 14. This is regarding the former Dumfries Academy Dining Hall, Academy Street Lovers Walk, Dumfries. Report by Senior Manager Property and Architectural Services. This is a report for homologation. The Council received a request from the Inspired Community Enterprise Trust to grant a standard security for the Big Lottery Fund over Dumfries Academy Dining Hall, Academy Street Lovers Walk, Dumfries. the standard security enabled the trust to draw down funding of 400,000, and there was an urgency in the matter. So the Chief Executive consulted with myself and the Vice Chairman, and having assessed the risks, we agreed that he should deal with the matter under delegated powers. Members are being asked to homologate the decision taking. I've lost the paper. As I intimated, there's an additional item. This is on the Scottish Youth Summit Commonwealth Connections. Alex?
Leader, I don't know if members have had the opportunity of reading the report. I thank you for taking it as a late item. I don't know if you want to allow members a few minutes to read it, or do you want us just to go straight into it?
Members? Okay, I think that means we'll just go straight into it. Sorry, once you've got it. I think it's a good news story.
I hope so, Leader. We've been asked if the Council would be prepared to host a National Youth Summit in May 2014. We still have to determine the venue. It's through the Duke of Edinburgh Award Scotland under the Commonwealth Connections project. Duke of Edinburgh Award Scotland require notification as soon as possible. They said early January 2014, and that's the reason we brought it forward. The details of the project or the event, insofar as we know them, are in the report. The cost to the Council will be of the order of £40,000 as set out. We consider that we can meet that cost from Community and Customer Service reserves. I've got both Harry Hay and Mark Malloy here to answer detailed questions from members. Leader, thank you.
Does anybody want to expand on what Alex said, or no? Just members? Ian?
Actually, I mean, happy with the report and what's been described along your own comments. It's the election time at the same time. I take it this has no impact on the elections going on. It's European, fair enough.
No, sir. I think it'll be very much apolitical, this one, and it will not affect the staff involved in the elections to a great extent.
The second point was where I was picking up on. It's the resource issue.
Really?
Clearly, if it's a national event, the venue is going to be key. One would assume Easterbrook or somewhere like that. But have you got any ideas where you might want to base this conference?
In terms of the discussions with Duke Edinburgh Awards Scotland so far, their preference is to host something within Dumfries itself, and there's tentative discussions taking place around the accommodation side in terms of local accommodation providers, but there's also the possibility that the summit might actually be around the kind of basis of a scout jamboree, where it's actually a camping type thing where the 200 young people would camp for the weekend, and the hope would be that we would use our own DG1 facility as the main conference venue, if it's available. Just in the early discussions with DG1 at the moment with that, but other options such as Easterbrook would be looked at as we go forward if members wish to support this.
Okay, we've got the recommendations. We're asked to agree to host this event and allocate the necessary budget up to a maximum of 40,000, and for the costs for this to be met from the Community and Customer Services reserves. Thank you. I have no other business.